Hi, I've got through a few more games since the last video. I've noticed how squeaky this chair is. Actually really sets off the mic level monitor in OBS, but that's something to be addressed at a later date. First thing is this game, and since there's a few, we'll just skip to how they were won or lost. This one I managed to reach a pretty decent position after a bit of a wacky opening from white. I'm also really practicing not mixing up the colours. For some reason my brain can't tell the difference between black and white and talk at the same time, but this is how the game went. I got a pretty nice position after I don't know how many moves. Yeah, as you can see we get to here and computer's actually showing +3 for black. I didn't realise it was quite that skewed in my favour. And I'd spent the last few moves making sure that I didn't blunder anything on G7. You know, realising that white's only recourse was to try and checkmate me here. And so, after giving check here and trading off pieces, which, you know, I thought must be reasonable since I'm a pawn up, I'm winning, may as well get the pieces off and try to neutralise any back rank threats. Keeping an eye on this d8 square. Yeah, this is I think why I put the queen here, not just to protect this this backwards d6 pawn, but to try and keep out any back rank checkmate threats here. Although that might not materialise because somehow I've ended up with the knight on h6. But needless to say, after white goes and blunders mating 3, I just completely missed this check, or at least I started giving checks, not really knowing what to do, to be honest, even though it's patently obvious, and quite annoying as well because, as you can see, I had 7 minutes left on the clock and white was down to 45 seconds, so this one really should have been in the bag. And at the point that white went here, you know, I chose to just, having missed the a4 check on the first occasion, I just thought, well, I'll win this game by dropping back and letting them run out of time, and then white goes and steps into the threat again, which I noticed. But then, you know, thinking I'd won the game, I went and played this and blundered mate in 1. I cannot really explain why, because as I say, I'd spent a good few moves in the mid game making sure I defended the 7th rank. So that's I'd say definitely my worst loss yet on the channel. You know, it's a pure case of tunnel vision, and just completely, my brain just decided the game was won, and that I don't know, I can't explain it. So I was checkmated on G7 there. Yeah, against Hello, I'm Elbower of Spain. Nice name. Yeah, white played one of these kind of funny, I'll move the knight twice things in the opening, which I'm not a fan of. I guess if you know a line, and a specific line, then it might be okay, but just moving the pieces multiple times for the sake of it is I don't think it's the right thing to do. I took here because I was worried about this, checks on a4 and my white bishop not being able to get back into the game to defend, so I thought basically a bit of simplification that distracts white's queen from the a4 square was the order of the day, although the computer doesn't really like it. And I think I chose to play c6 instead of developing... Why didn't I develop the knight? I think I was just contemplating a queen a5 check myself. I don't think it's anything more than that. So, having realised that e5 was playable, I managed to play it, I think, at the right moment. And that actually equalised almost. Not quite, but for practical purposes, I think that equalises from a reasonably bad position. Obviously, I thought it was quite bad to allow white's bishop to prevent castling and just to, generally be that annoying. So the gain of tempo with the knight allowed me to play this, which I think was a reasonable plan of action. And then the subsequent knight hop, just begins to harass the black king. Black, I've said it again, you see, I mix the colours up. I'm black, the white king. I think it's because I'm used to white being at the bottom of the board, and then when I play black, I don't know, it's something like that, but whatever it is, it's stupid. And at this point, although the computer's showing plus 1.5 for white, I would take black here every time, given that the white king is, had to step off its home square and blocking its own rook and all those kinds of bad things. I also considered trading off here for... Maybe I should have played... Oh, hold on. Why is that a blunder? I'm confused. What does it want us to do? It wants us to play this. Oh. Say what? Well, anyway, this didn't happen in the game. I just dropped the bishop back thinking that it looked like it was on a nice diagonal, and this knight in the centre is loose anyway, so I thought it might get dislodged at some point. White goes for a little bit of a tickle of the c6 pawn, so I just made a few developing moves, and I think that, this attempt by white seems like a reasonable thing to do to connect the rooks, but of course it allows queen g4 check. I was about to refer to black as white again, but it allows queen g4 check, which I managed to find, and then when they, I think they collapsed here, and at this point it was pretty much game over. Yeah, when they have to step into the line of check with long castling, it's bad. I have to say that I was just kind of playing moves. I didn't realise that was checkmate until I played it, but I think that was a reasonably decent victory, elevating the rating to 1226. I was getting bored with everything being e5, so I did go for... Is that the London system? It's that sort of vibe, isn't it? Where you make the party hat pawn formation and the bishop goes here and all that jazz, but black committed this fatal error, and actually, funnily enough, I was looking at... I spent a few seconds considering, bishop takes c6, and should I jump the knight into the centre, play knight e5, and then it dawned on me that they'd just left their queen hanging. So yeah, actually, if you look at the clock, well, we're playing with 15-second increments, so it took me about 10 seconds to spot that. But I did spot it, so they resigned after that. I decided to play another game, seeing as that one was only 8 moves. I thought I'd see if I got white again, maybe I'd wheel out the London again, or something London-esque. And I think I did, yeah, we got a slightly more interesting game. The Zucatort, and the Chigorin variation. There's also the Collie system, I think, which looks a bit like this. Somebody who knows openings might be able to shed some light on that in the comments, if you're there. Yeah, I think white, I've done it again. I'm going to get this right. So I think black makes an error here in, you know, going through this bishop retreating manoeuvre. It just seems to waste time and allow white to gain space to me. And I can't see any, maybe at this point the plan would be to play knight b4, targeting c2. But if they just go and do this, which they did, you know, it kind of feels like white's taking over the centre of the board. In fact, let's look at the analysis board instead. Where were we? Just so we can get the computer evaluation. Yeah, I mean, okay. Computer says it's completely even. I decided to, yeah, I recaptured here d takes rather than recapturing with the bishop, because I thought, although my dark squared bishop kind of looks a bit like a tall pawn, you know, evicting the bishop, the knight from f6 just looked like a quite useful move, because where's it going to go? You know, it had to jump in there. And I realised that on trading it off, that would wreck the black pawn structure. You know, I thought, given that I look like I'm in a better position now, especially because the white bishop is sort of entombed behind its own pawn, although, to be fair, my own bishop is, I decided not to trade queens and just to try and pile up some pressure on this pawn on e4. So we did a bit of this, and although everything's still level, I think, yeah, this looks to me like one of those positions where, despite the fact that my king's in the middle, white, I've done it again, I'm going to learn to get the colours right. Despite the fact that my king's in the middle, black hasn't really got much to do. And I can just start marching pawns forward. And I think this, the h6 attempt by black, creates a hook here, which I go for. And again, the computer thinks nothing of it, of course, but it's just one of those things that, you know, as a human player, you start seeing the defence being stripped away from the king, and yeah, I think it's difficult to try and find the right moves in that situation. I was also thinking at the same time that I've got my bishop and my queen pressuring here, and this, you know, I was not in a hurry to take this pawn, because now I've got a pawn on g5, you know, any attempt to, you know, if black tries to free themselves with f6 or something, I can just take twice, or if they, you know, do something rash like f5, I can take en croissant. Different ways, actually. Yeah, so that's why I wasn't taking this pawn straight away. Although having said that, I suppose if I'd have played bishop takes e4, I don't think they can just trade off, because then my queen would recapture on e4 and then be threatening mate on the h7 square. And I believe, I mean, I don't know if f7 would work, but I think they would play g6 in that position. And then I could just drop back my bishop to drop the dark squared bishop back to g3, slide the queen across. Yeah, that looks pretty hideous for black, I think. I didn't notice this move. I mean, although it looks like a bit of a kind of a desperate lash out, it does actually, it caused me to have to drop back with the queen, so it did alleviate the pressure on this central pawn. And as you can see, they do kind of get a bit blunderous and go with f5. I did take on croissant. And I don't think I played anything like the best moves at this point. But, there's so many holes in the black position, and, there's a little bit of a threat here, I suppose, but it's actually beneficial in the end that my king's in the middle, in a way. Yeah, because everywhere that black moves, there's checks. Yeah, I thought that, simply gobbling the pawn and gaining tempo on this bishop was good enough. And, yeah, I think I noticed straight away this was the fatal error, so that was a fairly reasonable game. Took the rating up to 1258. It's the mighty Atropine 215 of the United States. I'm not sure why it's not loading. Let's have a look. I think this was a bit of a... Oh yeah, Vienna game. This is one that I used to try and play actually as white. I really can't remember how this went. I believe... just thinking about this capture in the centre. I believe that is an error by white. It gives me the BBC, the big black centre. And I suppose if they had played bishop takes f6, the recapture with the queen does remove the defender of d5. Yeah. Yeah, I see. So they did go for that. But I thought the doubling of the pawns is not the end of the world, because, I've got this pin in place. Even this, the knight check, knight f8, knight f2, h6 didn't strike me as dangerous, because I would obviously just play g7. The knight would have to retreat. I wonder if they could they get some kind of perpetual check kind of thing going? Possibly, but they didn't do that. They retreated. Well, actually, silly me, yeah. Had they played, if they did this, and I did this, yeah, this is what I was thinking. Would I have to go here? Yeah, that doesn't great for white either, does it? So, how did the game go? It went like so. Yeah, so I just played what I regarded as a few consolidating moves. I was hoping that they would capture here, allowing me to repair the pawn structure, which they did. Yeah, I think that previous set of exchanges does seem to favour white, but the pressure of the queen-bishop battery onto f7 is negated by my bishop here, so you know, the belief in that bishop did come to fruition in the end, I think. Yeah, I think white just... I'm not sure about this capture. I guess it makes sense because... Does it? I'm thinking that it preserves the dark squared bishop, and I was thinking that, you know, that prevents checks here, it targets the h2 square. It looks like a better bishop than white's is currently. But of course, yeah, it does make sense. Blockading this pawn and being up at bishop for 2 pawns seems like a reasonable proposal. And I had a good look to make sure when I played this move that the rooks were protecting each other and the bishop, and you know, kind of making sure that everything protected everything, and that I could kind of sneak away into the corner. Here of course I blundered. That's it, you know, it's interesting that the computer hates that, because it just wants to bring the other rook, and then apparently it's a draw. However, we just exchanged a couple of pawns here. Yeah, I think this, the pawn push eliciting this, or should I say lining up the battery against the h2 square elicited this push, which of course allows me to start to open up the white king. Yeah, I just decided to offer trades, and yeah, I see. White didn't realise the pin on this pawn was active, so I managed to gobble there and they resigned. And for some reason the rating systems jumped my rating to 1325. So it's a nice little milestone, but I'm not sure why, because if you look at the recent opponents, you know, I've beaten a 1084, an 1104, an 1123 and a 1223, so yeah, not sure how it works, but 1325 it is, so we'll see if we can keep going on to 1400. Ta!